Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We're going to start with some bigger picture things here, and the first website I'd like to take you to is one put together by NOAA. And what it's going to show us here is a global map of Vegetation Health Index. But what I'd like to do is show you how the Vegetation Health Index, and there's a lot of different parameters that go into that, by the way, but how it compares to a year ago. So we're going to go to the drop-down menu and choose this one. Now we've kind of zoomed in here on North America, but what I'd like to do is just show you the color bar quickly, then we're going to blow this map up. These values represent where, compared to a year ago, the Vegetation Health Index values are below where they were, and this would be better. If we click on this, we can kind of get a global view, and let's just zoom in here and take a look. We notice that a lot of the southern and high plains, compared to a year ago, are looking much better when using this satellite-derived parameter. But as you kind of examine parts of the western Corn Belt extending into the Canadian Prairie, and then across parts of the Pacific Northwest, we certainly see a major degradation. And I don't think there's any surprise in that, but I want to just kind of give you those values. From here, I want to show you the latest drought monitor update. So this came out this morning. And as we just kind of examined where the drought has remained, it really shows up as just being established and very deep in the western United States. And then also here across the northern plains of the U.S. But let's do this real quick. Let's come down here and let's go to change maps, and let's just compare this to the last week and see how drought conditions have changed. So you notice we're starting to see some drought developing here in parts of Kansas and in southern Nebraska. There's been improvement in eastern Nebraska, in parts of Iowa, and over here also into the Great Lakes. But degradation in pockets here in Minnesota, and then of course as you get out here into the northern Rockies. So that just kind of gives us some perspective. To add to this, I want to put in here, this is the latest topsoil moisture, so we're looking at the top 10 centimeters or top 4 inches. And overall, some of the recent rains that did come through this area have really improved that topsoil moisture in places. But do notice we're missing in this area, and of course the Red River Valley of the North extending into northern Minnesota is showing up still with, because of the precipitation missing that area, very low values. You can also see how dry things are as you get over here into like the Columbia Basin and the Willamette Valley and interior parts of Oregon and Idaho. From there, why don't we just step down? This is now the top 16 inches. So again, top 4 to top 16. And then from there, I want to just take one more step down. Let's go to the top 100. And now you can see that even though a lot of rain came through this area, it did not completely revive the profile. And about 30% of our 30% of the Corn Belt and the majority of the western Corn Belt still has some form of deficit overall with soil moisture. We're much wetter to the south, and we're going to continue to stay wetter to the south. Same thing for the northeast as well. So from here, let's now take a look at what the front half of July has given us. So this would be precipitation ranked by climate district. And again, we're just looking here at the first 14 days of the month of July. So the storms that have come into this area and spread through here have improved our numbers over June, but where we've missed, we've gotten dry. Same thing in the kind of the Red River Valley extending here over to the northern or the headwaters of the Mississippi. But outside of those areas in the Pacific Northwest and California, where we don't expect improvement this time of year, we're quite wet overall. Now, big question I'm going to try to answer in this video is this going to be the pattern that'll persist through the end of July and then into August as well? Because the temperatures look something like this. It's a very unique year to see how we've been cooler to the south, cooler in the central United States, again, compared to normal, and very warm to the west and north of that line. Many areas here in the west having their warmest start to July on record. So let's just keep this all in the back of our mind as we kind of form this story on where the weather is going to be going here. Now, yesterday we did have quite a bit of severe storms, and we were monitoring these, and I'll be honest, I under-predicted the performance of these storms as they came through parts of Iowa. I thought the morning storms were going to dissipate, and it would be the evening storms that really fired up. But those morning storms went through and put down a lot of rain, and then the evening storms produced, as we can see here, the filtered reports, still 33 tornadoes. The vast majority of them were in the state of Iowa, and we're getting some of the damage reports from those today. So I wanted you to see those storm reports here. If we just stitch together, in fact, let's update this. There we go, 4 o'clock. This would be the latest I've got here on the last 3 days of total accumulated precip. So we've got the storms firing in the mountains here. We then have the storm system that came out of Montana across South Dakota and northern Nebraska. Again, this was a benefit here. We were not expecting that much rain in that area. And then they raced across Iowa and southern Wisconsin. Now, there are a lot of places in through here that did not get these heavier rains. But one of those areas that really needed it right in through here got it. And that overall is a solid picture. Now, the front that produced this is going to continue to slide to the south and east, where you see we've had a lot of scattered storms over the last several days, including some heavy rain in parts of the northeast. And as we think about this and where it's going, let's just go right now to the low levels of the atmosphere and take a look at this flow. So, high pressure center is parked here, and there's another one that's parked right down here. So you can kind of see they're both spinning in the same direction. And what you end up getting is kind of opposing flow. Do you notice that? So that means the frontal boundary that's in between this is just not going to move quickly. It's almost stationary, but it's just going to slowly slide farther to the south and just set up an area of rain that progressively increases over the next several days. The other part to this is that spinning here off of British Columbia is a low that's cut off, and it's going to help to reinforce a large ridge that's going to be building into this area in the coming days. No action over here in terms of tropical waves I want to talk about, but we do have Felicia here that's going to be moving over the next 7 to 10 days toward the Hawaiian Islands, so we'll keep an eye on that as well. So if we come down and just look at some of the latest satellite data, check this out. As I just animate backwards here, so we're going back, there it is, there's sunrise. You can almost see the two high pressure cells. In fact, why don't you look right here and watch this, ready? As I just go back and forth, can you see the clockwise rotation there? That's the high that's to the north. The high that's to the south is pumping in this moisture. And as I kind of just stop this here, this is about our latest imagery. Storms are firing all along this line, and they're also firing in the mountains. You can see the smoke that is widespread in the west as well. Now, taking a look at this, the Storm Prediction Center did an upgrade today right here through Illinois. This is close to my backyard. I live right over here in a little town called Mahomet, and this is the frontal boundary on which we're going to watch these storms. And they did issue a mesoscale discussion, and in this discussion, this again from the Storm Prediction Center, they're talking about the risk of there being some strong straight line winds. One of the big reasons for that is because a forecast sounding from our high resolution model suggests, well, we've got plenty of instability. Notice our wind direction here is very unidirectional. It gets stronger with height, but overall it's all coming from the same direction. What that ends up doing is it ends up producing storms that tend to form line segments rather than staying, single-celled, if that makes sense. And if I just take you back here, let's just go all the way back to the beginning. There's the storms yesterday coming out of Iowa to northern Illinois, also extending into Wisconsin and lower Michigan, and the tail coming back here to Kansas, bringing some much-needed rain there. And then we watched as that boundary, just look how slow it's moving here. It's just barely moving. And then the convection blows up here in the afternoon heat today, and those storms are kind of getting organized. Now, I was out looking really close at some of these storms, and I want to show you something kind of neat. Since this is my extended, video, let's just do this, okay? Here's a storm going right across the radar in Lincoln, Illinois. And if you're familiar with how radar data work, what you're seeing here is radar reflectivity, or the intensity of precipitation. Now, this right here, let's watch it again. See that little fine line on the radar right there? That's almost to Decatur. That is the shelf cloud, or the outflow of these storms. And you'll notice as they're coming here, let's just pause it and just step back just a little bit. As they're coming right here, near the radar, you do get a sense that there is a bow to it. And that tells me that there must be a very strong back-to-front flow. That black dot, by the way, is where the radar is located. Now take a look at this. We're going to flip this over and show you the high-res, sorry about that. Let's go velocity. There we go. This is the high-res velocity data. Now these are always colored green or red. Green is when the precipitation is coming toward the radar, and red away. So you can see the strong straight line winds that went over the radar, and then once they passed it, the color flips to red. So this is how we measure the Doppler shift. Interestingly enough, let's look at that carefully. You can actually see where the radar is picking up. See these echoes right here? Those are echoes along the interstate. And we might, this will be kind of fun, we can probably figure out how so we got some people here going about 50, 60 miles an hour right here on this part of the highway. And over here, I don't know, sometimes we can catch a speeder every once in a while. It looks like everybody's obeying the speed limit so far. But let's zoom back out here and again look at the strong winds that are on the leading edge of this storm. So you can tell that some of these winds here were gusting 50-60 miles an hour, and it's heading right over to where I live, which is Mahomet right here. So we'll keep an eye out on this as time goes by here. So I just thought I'd teach you a little bit about radar and how we use it. Okay, from there, let's now go back to the presentation. There we go. And let's talk about the tropics. So we've kind of got this idea on where some of these near-term storms are going to go. Not a whole lot going on. We do have one area here the National Hurricane Center is given a 10% chance of forming, but I wanted to show you what's going on across the Atlantic, because it's a kind of a big fat nothing, okay? There are no organized waves. There's no areas of big, deep convection. There's just this coming off of the west coast of Africa, but it's not much to look at there. There's quite a bit of dust in the air to the north of it, and this little low here, which is given a 10% chance of developing, isn't going to be coming toward the United States at all. And so we just look at that and say, well, there's not a whole lot of action going on. What's interesting about that is this. So this graphic shows you vertical wind shear. So we're looking at the how much the wind speeds change with height. And normally during a hurricane season, if you have low vertical wind shear, that is a great environment for developing a lot of tropical cyclones. So where we are right now in the season, right here, is kind of the bottom, the climatological bottom of wind shear. It's much higher back in spring and winter. And right now the values are way down there, which means if we could have got an African easterly wave or something coming off of or in the main development region, this would have had no problem organizing. But there's no trigger to kick anything off right now. We may have to wait quite some time for that to occur. And the reason why is because of the MJO. It's been over the Indian Ocean. It's heading now over the maritime continent. And what that means is it's going just north of Australia into Indonesia and the Philippine Islands. If this curls around, which we think it will do by the start of August, perhaps, coming back over toward Africa, that could really get things going again. Because what that'll do is that'll shift the best rising motion in the atmosphere from here and allow it to come back over to this area. And if that occurs, we start to kick off these easterly waves in the flow, which means that possibly once we start the month of August, we could be looking at a much bigger increase in tropical cyclone activity. But until then, there's a lot of suppression here, mainly due to the Indian monsoon advancement and where the MJO is sitting because of that. So I wanted to keep you up to date on those things. Okay, big story for North America. If we look at the jet stream level flow, is going to be this. Throughout the next few days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. There we go. What we're going to notice here is a ridge developing from the four corners here through parts of the southern Canadian prairie. There's that trough sitting off the coast. We talked about that on Monday. Part of that EPO pattern we discussed, and the ridge is running over the top of it. Downstream, there's a broad trough in this area. But we need to see what this is going to do to the precipitation pattern and what this is going to do to temperatures, because basically through our next 5 to 10 days, that is our most dominant feature in the flow of the jet stream. So this again is jet stream level winds. We're just kind of following that flow. So let's talk about it. This is what we got from the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center. And what we notice is that boundary is stalling out here and then slowly moving. So the precipitation you see south of this line, which is falling today over the next 7 days, is primarily from that slow-moving boundary, fed on Gulf moisture, and a high-pressure cell that's building in behind it. Unfortunately, that high is sitting right on top, as you saw earlier, some of the driest ground in North America in the Red River Valley of the North. And that dry area is going to expand to the south and east with time. So from there, why don't we check in on our two major models? This is the next 7 days from the ECMWF, and this is the next 7 days from the GFS. And to be honest, both models are doing a pretty darn good job at finding the same features. There are subtle differences, but the pattern is being picked up quite well. Again, the GFS versus the 12Z ECMWF. Now, let's get into this and kind of see the differences, and then we'll walk through the models together. Over the next 7 days, this is the model differences. So the GFS is wetter in through this area, whereas the European is much wetter farther to the south, as you notice, and over parts of the Great Lakes. What I am going to be watching for, and this is not going to be well represented in the models, is that if that ridge builds up like this and the heights cascade down on the other side, we could get in this area ridge riding thunderstorms, and they could extend even farther to the south and east. Models struggle with picking up on that pattern. That's where we as human forecasters can add some insight. I'm going to be watching for that very carefully. But our models, as we compare them, look something like this. So this is the 12Z runs. Ready? Overall, I'm very pleased with the agreement here. Through the day on Thursday, getting now into Friday, that boundary is stalled in this area. So we're going to see our continuation of scattered showers and storms. It is in both models here. All right. We'll open the Gulf, so there'll be afternoon showers and storms from eastern Texas all the way to North Carolina, and it's in both models. So working our way into Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening, the front, as you see over in the European, slides or continues to slide further to the east and south, and a little weak low tries to form here over parts of the northeast, and the European is wetter over the northeast. And as we go into Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening, you do notice that, again, both models are letting that front sag farther to the south. I know it looks a little different in the GFS with the way it portrays precipitation, but this area and through here where that front is stalled will move to the south throughout the weekend, as we see here. Then going into next week, we're going to watch a low kind of run over the top. See it here going toward the Hudson Bay? That could bring some showers and storms to the Canadian prairie. But then as we get into next Tuesday, Wednesday, the models agree. Put the high here, let it slide out of the Red River Valley of the north, and the front is farther to its south, and it's there in both models. It's a pretty well-defined pattern going through our next 5 days. What about next week? Well, do you start to see here by next Wednesday? There is something going on in that northwest flow. And that could initiate some rounds of storms that move through the upper Midwest, that possibly move through the Red River Valley into, the Great Lakes states. I'm watching it carefully, and I'll keep an eye on that for next week as that ridge develops. But after that, overall, models, look at this, even all the way out there to next Saturday, they're both trying to curl up a low here. That's some good agreement overall. So when, again, we just kind of stitched that together and looked at the total precipitation, why don't we just, we'll go back here to the ECMWF and just say, take a good snapshot of this. I think this is the way the precipitation pattern is going to shake down from today all the way through the end of next week. All right. From there, how that high pressure cell moves south is shown here in the day 4 through 10 time period. Now, do you start to see the little bits of green showing up here? Those could be our ridge runners. The high pressure cell starts here and then moves farther to the south. So you do see that in day 4 through 10, there's an area that is going to be drier. Southwestern monsoon still going, and where the front parks, that's where we're going to be seeing our wettest weather. And that's been an area that's been wet all year long down there. So that is what day 4 through 10 looks like. Now looking out there exclusively at week 2, the models are washing out where this ridge is going to be. And in general, the flow is going to go over them something like this. So we should expect the heat to be north with cooler weather farther to the south. But what's that precipitation pattern going to look like? Well, the new ECMWF run that came out after the markets closed today did show wetter in these areas compared to previous runs. And it's expanded the southwestern monsoon and has left that lingering front still in eastern Texas through the lower Mississippi River Valley. So what I'm trying to tell you is this is a wetter look for week 2 than was forecast earlier today. And here's what the GFS says. It is also wetter in this area. Stronger southwestern monsoon and the flow over the mountains here, but it's drier down in the southeast than the European model is at this point. So good agreement in certain places, but a little bit of disagreement over parts of the southeast in terms of the week 2 precipitation patterns. Now from there, why don't we stretch this out by looking at temperatures next? So we've already seen our high temperatures today. It was cooler where the cloud cover was, but what you're going to notice is going out into Friday and then into Saturday and Sunday, the ridge builds. We're cool along the coast. This is pretty close to normal in the Central Valley of California, but come to the Snake River Valley, through Montana, through the Northern Plains and Canadian Prairie, we're talking upper 90s, lower 100s. And what happens is getting out to next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, that is the pattern that's going to take shape. So we're only in the 80s, low 90s down here, where we can get so much hotter this time of year in Texas. But that stalled out frontal boundary and the increase chances of clouds and precipitation is just what's keeping it cool. While under the ridge to the north, it is very, very hot. 104 possibly in parts of eastern Montana into next week. How long does that last? Well, this is the day 5 through 10 outlook in terms of temperatures. And you can see it expanding in the upper Midwest as well. So out of the Canadian Prairie and the Northern Plains into the upper Midwest, as you look out at those temperatures that take us clear out to the 25th of July. All right. Now from here, I want to turn my attention to some longer range discussion. And the new European weeklies were just released right as I was producing this video. So I'm going to look at the time period here. In fact, let's just back this up a little bit. How about the 25th of July through the 24th of August? Now, I mentioned something at the beginning of this video, and that was, are we going to be seeing persistence in the pattern? Well, right now, the European model says yes for the temperatures. This is just a repeat of what we've been seeing. In fact, I'll just take you back to it. I mean, this is where we were, right, for the beginning of July. And the models, where was I? Right in here. Nope, right there. Continue that. What about the precipitation side of things? Well, maybe we could answer that first by looking at pressure. So Bermuda High still in place. I mean, that flow around that has not been a feature that has blocked up the eastern half of the country. So we keep the Gulf open. And if you keep the Gulf open, the models just say, well, if that moisture comes in, we got to do something with it. And it precipitates it out. So you do see a slight wet bias over the next 30 days in this area. Again, I'll say the same thing I said on Monday. I am very challenged to figure out where that boundary is, where the models are too wet on one side of it, the northwest side of it. So I think that we could have more dryness in this area than the models are leading on to at this point. All right, so that looks us out over that time period. From there, let's get into a discussion now about some of the bigger factors moving forward. I mentioned in Monday's video about the fact that momentum has dropped, and then it's rebuilding now throughout the beginning of July. Where the increases are coming from, some way down here south of the equator, but overall we're near normal in North America, well, Northern Hemisphere, and of course that cuts across North America. Now what I want to be watching for is any change in the momentum in this area. And if it continues to fall off in this area, that could lead toward blocking and some problems once we get into the end of July and August for heat and drought. That is one thing I want you to watch with me. The other thing are these ocean temperatures, and we're going to dissect this two different ways here. The main development region for hurricanes is still warm, and even the near normal temperatures you see here, warm enough to support hurricane development, which means once we get into August and the pattern begins to adjust, we're going to watch it carefully. The second thing comes back to a discussion about La Nina. Now, we have mentioned this in the past that we do expect cooling to occur in this entire area as we progress through the end of summer and toward fall and winter. And I've showed you before that the ensemble plumes are suggesting that once we get into fall and winter, we're going to go back into weak, possibly even moderate La Nina conditions. What I want to do is I just want to take a moment to kind of explain what I think the influence of this will be. Because when we watch this in the forecast, this is a 3-month sliding window out August, September, October, November, and then October, November, December. You can see the influence of the cooler water in this area. Now, La Ninas are defined by stronger trade winds coming out of this direction, right? And you tend to get a lot of rising motion in the atmosphere here over MJO regions 4 and 5 and 6. Now, why I bring this back up, because we've talked about this, is because when we think about that flow pattern, if you increase the rising motion here, it's got to sink somewhere. And if there's subsidence, general subsidence on this side of the Pacific Ocean, remember, this La Nina will be developing about the time that South Americans will be getting ready to plant their next crop. And we saw delays last year, and this is a big question for this year. Are we going to continue to see that? Because when you correlate the rising and sinking motion in the atmosphere with La Nina, what you end up getting is a lot of rising motion here, all right, and then subsidence in this side of the Pacific, and that includes Brazil. Sinking motion. I just want to kind of just plant a seed in your brain about this and tell you that I'm going to keep talking about it as we move forward, okay? But we looked last time at what had happened with the new long-range European forecast. So what I'm going to do next is update you with the NMME, the National Multi-Model Ensemble. So let's go in here and let's look at the next 3 months in terms of precipitation rate. Just like the European, the dividing line seems to be along the Mississippi, where down here to the south and to the east we see wetter, and it's suggesting that the plains are going to be the drier region. In terms of temperatures, let's just go back and take a look at what those temperatures are holding. You again see that it's across the northern tier of the U.S. where it's expected to see the warmer conditions, and we're near normal to cooler across the south. So that's persistence in the pattern overall. We need to keep a close eye on that, okay? And if I could finish with one last thing, I want to talk about Europe quickly. You've heard about the big lows that have come out of France through Germany causing a lot of flooding, but I want to focus right in through here. Northern Ukraine into this part of the Russian wheat belt. That area has been quite dry. This is the last 30 days of precip. What I want you to see is that over the next week, we continue to see, 10 days actually, that area is going to continue to be dry. In northern Ukraine, we've already started to see certain drought indicators showing drought developing in that area. But down here closer to the Black Sea, it has been wetter, and we expect it to continue to stay wetter. But I just want to point out, the heat is coming up with this as well. So we need to keep a close eye on what's going on in Europe. Hey, we covered a lot in today's video. Hope you found it informative and useful. I'll pick back up here on Monday, and we'll go again. Appreciate your attention. Thank you.